The Florida Panhandle, the Florida Big Bend, and the Florida West Coast must be on alert as Tropical Storm Helene organizes in the Caribbean. Good afternoon, I'm Mike Nasa with this Tuesday afternoon update on the tropics. This is a beautiful true color visible imagery of Tropical Storm Helene right there in the Western Caribbean, and it is looking much better organized this afternoon, starting to fan out there on its western side, which is a sign that the system is strengthening, and it is expected to become a major hurricane prior to landfall along the Florida west coast. Here is the latest on Tropical Storm Helene as of 2 p.m. Eastern Time. There'll be a new update at 5 p.m. There shouldn't be too much of a change. It is at 19.4 north, 84.5 west, winds of 45 miles per hour, moving west-northwest at 12 miles per hour, and that should eventually become more northwesterly through time around the ridge of high pressure. Helene should become a hurricane on Wednesday, and then a major hurricane, a Category 3 major hurricane, by Thursday morning as it accelerates as a trough digs into the central United States and the ridge slides towards the east, and Helene will slam right into the Florida coastline, probably in the area of the Big Bend, but anybody along the Florida Panhandle and the West Coast should be prepared for a direct strike from a major hurricane. We do have hurricane watches out, and that goes from Inglewood to Indian Pass. That includes Tampa Bay. You guys are under a hurricane watch. Also a hurricane watch for the northeastern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula and the western areas there of Cuba. This will all be upgraded to hurricane warnings as the system not only is going to strengthen into a hurricane, but we don't have a lot of time. I'd love to tell you, like I have on dozens and dozens of updates over dozens and dozens of hurricane seasons, we've got plenty of time to watch it. We really don't. We're talking about Tuesday today, Wednesday tomorrow, and then Thursday landfall. So we have about 48 hours, and that is not a lot of time when you're dealing with a potential strike from a major hurricane. Here's the visible imagery up close, and look at this little spin right in here. See that little curly Q right there? That is the low-level circulation of Helene. And what's funny is Helene has been pretty naked around the center. Most of the convection has been spread out on the outskirts here to the east over the Cayman Islands and areas there of the Isle of Youth. But we are now starting to see it get a little bit more organized right near the center. And we did have an upper level low over the Yucatan Peninsula about 12 to 18 hours ago, shearing it. And it appears now that the western side is starting to fan out. See that? So that's a sign that the shear is letting up. The environment is very favorable for intensification. So as long as Helene can get some convection over the center, we will see it strengthen rather abruptly. Here are the computer models, and again, a very dangerous hurricane. They've trended a little bit east. I mean, last time I spoke with you, they were very much more in Appalachia Bay. Now they've kind of pooled here closer to Steinhatchee, so areas like St. Mark's and the whole Big Bend region there, really under the gun. But we have pretty good agreement that this thing is not going to stray much from this. Again, if you are as far south as Tampa, Sarasota, you guys need to really keep a watch. And if you're as far to the northwest as Pensacola, Destin, Gulf Shores, keep an eye, obviously. But it appears as though the area there in the Big Bend that was struck by Hurricane Debbie a couple of weeks back, several weeks back, is going to be hit again. After landfall, it should weaken, but not before spreading dangerous conditions into Georgia, and then it'll bend back around. We could have some rainfall here in the southern United States as time goes by. The one good thing I wanted to point out, and I've said this on prior updates, is that if it does make landfall in this area, there are a lot of rural state parks, wildlife management areas, and a much more desolate location for the Florida coastline than if it moved here more towards areas of Destin and Horseshoe Beach and Pensacola, Panama City, or further south towards Tampa, Clearwater, St. Petersburg. So while we don't want to wish a major hurricane on anybody, it's still a major hurricane, this area is much more less populated around the coastline. So if we do get a high storm surge, hopefully it wouldn't be in populated areas, but then you look, the hurricane's going to rip right through Tallahassee. So even though they're not at the coast, we're going to see impacts inland. The European ensembles there continue to show the system slamming into that region. The GFS as well. This is the GFS model. Watch, it takes our system. There goes Helene towards Florida. Watch, this is the long range as of 12 Zulu. It takes Helene into Florida, and then as time goes by, develops our other system here in the Atlantic, moves it out to sea, and then we have more systems behind that off Africa. And if you really want to get scared, you look at the very long-range GFS model. It has a major hurricane roaring right towards the Bahamas and another hurricane in the Gulf by the time October 10th comes around. Now, take it with a grain of salt. It's a long way out, but it's an indication that we need to keep an eye on things as time goes by. The rainfall, as I mentioned, will be high, especially here south of areas of North Carolina and Tennessee, and Florida into Georgia, and even the lower Tennessee Valley. You guys do have a high flood threat from Tallahassee through Atlanta, Chattanooga, Knoxville, Nashville. You guys are going to get in on the impacts as Helene moves in and then kind of loops here back towards areas there of Memphis, Springfield, Missouri, and Cape Girardeau. The storm surge is the dangerous part of any hurricane landfalling in the Big Bend of Florida. This whole area is very, very susceptible to high water rises. We have storm surge warnings out. We have potential for 10 to 15 feet in areas here near the Ocklawahnee River, and 5 to 10 feet back to Indian Pass and down to the Anclote River. Again, this area might not be as populated as further south, but there are still communities and fishing towns and people, and we need to be ready for it. 10 to 15 feet is a very, very high storm surge. This is expected to be a dangerous major hurricane, nothing to mess around with crashing waves on top of that. And that's to say nothing about south here. 5 to 8 feet in Tampa Bay, 3 to 5 feet in Charlotte Harbor. Tampa Bay during Hurricane Ian had a reverse surge because the winds were blowing offshore. If you have this hurricane coming in up here near St. Mark's with an onshore flow, people in Tampa Bay might go, Ian was south of us in 2022. We didn't get any storm surge. It blew away. All of a sudden, Helene comes up in a different direction, and you get nailed there. So you guys got to be ready for high storm surges all along the west coast of Florida. We have another really impressive wave approaching the islands. We'll keep an eye on that. This one is a high chance for development near Africa. It could become a tropical storm or a hurricane, but will probably stay out, and we're going to watch it. Hurricane John struck Mexico as a Category 3, like Helene is expected to strike Florida, caused a lot of problems. It has dissipated, but there's very heavy rainfall and a very dangerous and deadly flood threat there in Mexico. Everybody needs to be ready for that. So in the final analysis this afternoon, I wanted to touch on Helene. Helene is going to strengthen into a hurricane and then a major hurricane and take aim there at the Florida Big Bend. If you are in anywhere from Pensacola all the way down to the Keys, everybody needs to be ready for the impacts from Helene. Listen to local officials, and I'll be able to be here with further updates as everybody zeroes in on Helene as time goes on. I'm Mike Naso, and I will talk to you next time with more on Helene.